They say the dead tell no tales. But what if the silence of the cemetery is a lie? Welcome, seeker of shadowed truths, to Nightmare True Horror. Tonight, we unearth 7 true stories from these hallowed, yet haunted, grounds, where grief meets the grotesque, and the line between the living and the departed blurs into terror. What unsettling secrets do you believe lie buried beneath the tombstones? Share your own graveyard encounters in the comments. And if you dare to walk these moonlit paths with us, subscribe. The gates are always open. And remember, the most chilling revelations often claw their way from 6 feet under, just when you think you're safe. I've always hated cemeteries. The manicured lawns and polished headstones feel like desperate attempts to sanitize death, to make it palatable. But every Sunday, for the past 8 months, I've made the drive to Pinewood Memorial Gardens anyway. A ritual born from guilt after my sister Claire's sudden passing. Claire was only 34 when an aneurysm took her. Too young, too vibrant to be reduced to a granite marker under the sprawling oak tree in Section C. Our parents, buried nearby, had the decency to die in their 70s after full lives. Claire's death felt like a cosmic error, one I tried to correct through weekly visits with fresh flowers and one-sided conversations. The first few Sundays I was too consumed by grief to notice much beyond Claire's plot. But as the sharp edges of loss began to dull, I became aware of the cemetery's other regular visitors. An elderly woman who sang softly to her husband's grave. A middle-aged man who left painted rocks for his son. And the various groundskeepers who maintained Pinewood's 20 acres with quiet efficiency. And then there was him, the man in the charcoal suit. I first spotted him in late February, when winter still gripped the cemetery. He stood perfectly still beside an unmarked grave in the cemetery's oldest section, his gaunt frame silhouetted against bare trees. No flowers, no kneeling in prayer, no visible emotion, just silent vigilance, his eyes scanning the grounds with unsettling intensity. I thought little of it until the following Sunday, when he appeared in exactly the same spot, wearing the same impeccable suit, maintaining the same unnatural stillness. As I arranged fresh daffodils on Claire's grave, I felt his gaze like a physical weight. When I glanced up, his eyes shifted away, but the sensation of being observed remained. "That's Morris," said a voice behind me, making me jump. It was Ray, the elderly groundskeeper who'd worked at Pinewood for decades. He nodded toward the distant figure. At least that's what we call him. Been coming every Sunday long as I can remember. "Who's buried there?" I asked, noticing how the grave lacked even a simple marker. Ray's weathered face creased with uncertainty. Funny thing, not rightly sure. That section's from the 1890s. Records got damaged in the courthouse fire back in '63. He leaned on his rake. Morris never causes trouble, so management lets him be. But he just stands there, watching. "Everyone grieves different," Ray shrugged, though something in his tone suggested he found it as unsettling as I did. Over the following weeks, I became increasingly aware of Morris's presence, how his gaze would linger on certain visitors, particularly those who came alone, how he never arrived or departed. He was simply there when I arrived, and still there when I left. How even on rainy days, his suit remained pristine, not a drop of water darkening the fabric. I mentioned him to my friend Diane over lunch, describing his unsettling vigil. "Maybe he's a cemetery enthusiast," she suggested. "You know, one of those history buffs who's fascinated by old graves." "This isn't fascination," I insisted. "It's more like surveillance." Diane's expression turned concerned. "Alex, I know Claire's death hit you hard. Sometimes grief makes us see patterns that aren't there, project our pain onto random situations. I wanted to believe she was right, that my unease was simply grief playing tricks on my mind. But the following Sunday proved otherwise. It was unusually warm for April, the cemetery alive with spring's renewal. I brought Claire's favorite tulips, and was so focused on arranging them that I didn't notice the shadow falling across the grave until it was too late. "Beautiful flowers," said a voice like dry leaves rustling. "Your sister would have appreciated them." I jerked upright, nearly toppling the vase. Morris stood less than 3 feet away, his sudden proximity terrifying. Up close, His appearance was even more disturbing. Skin pulled too tight across sharp cheekbones. Eyes so deeply set they seemed to recede into darkness. Lips bloodlessly thin. "How did you?" I stammered, heart hammering against my ribs. "How do you know about my sister?" His smile revealed teeth too perfectly aligned, too uniformly white. "I observe. I remember. It's what I do here." He gestured vaguely toward his unmarked grave in the distance. 34 is young to die. An aneurysm, wasn't it? So unexpected. Ice slid down my spine. I'd never discussed Claire's cause of death with anyone at the cemetery. "Who are you?" "A caretaker of sorts." His gaze drifted to a young woman visiting a grave several plots away. "This place requires attention." "The groundskeepers handle that," I said, desperate to end this conversation. Morris's eyes snapped back to me, suddenly intense. "Not that kind of caretaking. There are rules here. Boundaries between grief and obsession. Some visitors need guidance." Before I could respond, Ray appeared on the path nearby, calling my name with forced cheerfulness. Morris stepped back, nodded almost imperceptibly, and walked away with measured steps toward his usual post. "You okay?" Ray asked, eyeing Morris's retreating figure. He bothering you? He knew things about my sister," I said, my voice unsteady. "Things he couldn't possibly know." Ray's expression darkened. "Best to keep your distance. Some folks here aren't what they seem." "What does that mean?" I pressed, but Ray just shook his head. "Just be careful is all. And maybe visit on different days for a while." I took Ray's advice, switching my visits to Wednesday afternoons. For 3 weeks, I saw no sign of Morris, and my unease began to fade. Then curiosity got the better of me. What was it about that unmarked grave that drew him? What kind of caretaking did he think he was doing? On a Wednesday, when I knew Ray would be off duty, I brought Claire her flowers, then wandered casually toward the old section where Morris always stood. The unmarked grave was easy to identify. A simple rectangle of earth, slightly sunken with age. No headstone or marker to identify its occupant. I glanced around to ensure I was alone, then knelt beside it. The ground felt strangely cold, despite the warm spring day, as if winter lingered beneath the surface. As I examined the plot, something caught my eye. A small corner of white protruding from the soil near the grave's edge. Gently, I brushed away the dirt, revealing a fragment of yellowed paper. Tugging carefully, I extracted what appeared to be an old photograph, its edges crumbling with age. Though faded and water-damaged, I could make out several figures standing before Pinewood's entrance gate. The photo looked to be from the early 1900s based on the clothing styles. As I turned it over, my blood froze. Written in faded ink was a simple message: Cemetery Guardian, 1903. And there, among the group of men in the photo, was a face I recognized immediately: Morris, looking exactly as he did now, over a century later. My hands trembled as I stared at the impossible image. This had to be a prank, a bizarre coincidence, perhaps a relative who bore a striking resemblance. But the face was unmistakable. Those same hollow eyes, that same gaunt countenance. So fixated was I on the photograph that I didn't register the footsteps behind me until a shadow fell across the image. "You shouldn't disturb what isn't yours." Morris's voice was colder than I'd ever heard it. All pretense of civility gone. I scrambled to my feet, the photograph clutched in my trembling hand. "What is this? Who are you?" "I told you. A caretaker." He reached for the photograph with pale, slender fingers. "Some boundaries shouldn't be crossed. This photo is over 100 years old," I said, backing away. "You can't possibly. Time moves differently here," he interrupted, continuing his advance. "For those who understand its nature." I turned to flee, but found my path blocked by a stone mausoleum I didn't remember seeing before. Panic surged through me as Morris closed the distance between us. "Your grief for Claire is genuine," he said, his voice softening slightly. "But your visits have become excessive. 8 months of Sundays, then Wednesdays too. The living shouldn't linger among the dead." "You're here every week," I countered, still retreating until my back pressed against cold stone. "I'm not among the living." His matter-of-fact tone chilled me more than any threat could have. "I haven't been since 1903, when they buried me in that unmarked grave after I took my own life. Cemetery suicide. a shameful secret. They denied me a marker, but they couldn't deny me purpose. I wanted to dismiss his words as the ravings of a madman, but the photograph in my hand told a different story. What purpose? To watch. To watch. To guide. To ensure the boundary remains clear. He gestured toward distant graves where other visitors mourned. Some come to remember. Others come because they cannot let go. Those who cannot let go eventually join us. Join us, I repeated, noticing movement from the corner of my eye. Other figures emerging from between distant headstones, all watching with the same unnerving stillness that characterized Morris. We were all like you once, he continued. Unable to release our loved ones, visiting beyond the natural course of grief until the cemetery claimed us. He extended his hand. The photograph, please. I clutched it tighter. And if I refuse, then you've made your choice. Something like regret flickered across his face. Ray tried to warn you. He recognizes the signs. He's been watching this cemetery for 40 years. Ray's the groundskeeper, I said, confusion momentarily overriding fear. Morris's smile held no warmth. Ray died in 1983. Heart attack while tending the north section. Those who notice him assume he's staff because they expect to see groundskeepers in a cemetery. Just as they expect to see mourners like me. My mind reeled, trying to process his words. I remembered how Ray never seemed to interact with other staff, how he appeared and disappeared so suddenly, how he'd always changed the subject when I asked personal questions. This is insane, I whispered, though doubt had already taken root. Check the memorial wall by the office, Morris said, as if reading my thoughts. Raymond Carter, 1983. 30 years of service to Pinewood Memorial Gardens. With a sudden burst of desperate energy, I shoved past him and ran, the photograph still clutched in my hand. I sprinted through the cemetery, past startled visitors, not stopping until I reached the small administrative building near the entrance. There, on a bronze plaque honoring deceased staff, was the name exactly as he'd said. Raymond Carter, 1932 to 1983, groundskeeper. My legs gave out, and I sank onto a nearby bench, the photograph trembling in my grasp. I forced myself to look at it again, to confront the impossible truth it represented. As I studied the image, I noticed something I'd missed before, a woman standing at the edge of the group, partially cut off by the photo's border. Though her face was barely visible, something about her posture, the tilt of her head, seemed hauntingly familiar. I turned the photo over again, and there in the corner, previously hidden by my thumb, was another notation. A. Harper, photographer. My surname. My initial. When I looked up, Morris stood before me, no longer threatening but watching with what almost seemed like compassion. Time is circular here, he said quietly. We all find our way back, eventually. I left the cemetery at a run, and didn't return for weeks. I threw myself into work, into social activities, into anything that might help me forget what I'd seen. I researched Pinewood's history, finding fragments that both challenged and confirmed Morris's claims. Records of a suicide in 1903, mentions of a dedicated groundskeeper named Ray, even references to a local photographer with my surname who documented the cemetery's early years. For 2 months I stayed away. Claire's birthday came and went without my usual graveside visit. I told myself I was breaking the cycle, proving Morris wrong about my inability to let go. Then, one rainy Sunday, I found myself driving the familiar route to Pinewood, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't name. I told myself it was just to prove I could visit normally, leave flowers, and depart without lingering. The cemetery was deserted in the downpour. I hurried to Claire's grave, umbrella clutched against the wind, and placed fresh flowers in the permanent vase. As I straightened, I caught sight of the old section where Morris kept his vigil. He wasn't there. Relief washed over me, followed immediately by an inexplicable sense of loss. I turned to leave, but found my path blocked by a figure in a rain-slicked black coat. Not Morris, but a woman with a familiar, gentle smile. He said you'd come back today, she said, her voice achingly familiar despite its ethereal quality. He's always right about these things. My umbrella slipped from nerveless fingers as I stared into my sister's face. Claire's face, unchanged by death or time. This isn't real, I whispered. You're not real. Neither are you, anymore. She gestured toward a fresh grave I hadn't noticed before, just 3 plots away from hers. The headstone bore my name with yesterday's date. Car accident, she explained gently. You were distracted, thinking about the cemetery, about Morris's warnings, about me. She held out her hand. It's time for you to take your place, Alex, as a watcher, as a guardian. I backed away, shaking my head in denial, but something made me turn toward the cemetery entrance. There, parked haphazardly by the gate, was my car, its front end crumpled, windshield spiderwebbed with cracks. I don't remember, I whispered. You will, Claire assured me, and then you'll help others like Morris helped you, those who grieve too long, those who can't let go. As the truth settled over me like the steady rain, I saw Morris approaching across the cemetery grounds, that familiar, solemn expression on his face. But now there was recognition in his eyes, acknowledgement of a shared purpose. The living shouldn't linger among the dead, he said, echoing his earlier warning. But we make exceptions for the guardians. I looked back at my grave, so new, so raw. Then to Claire's familiar smile. The weight of understanding pressed down upon me, inescapable as the rain soaking through my clothes. How long? I asked. Until you're no longer needed, Morris replied. Until you've helped enough lost souls find their way back to the living. He gestured toward the unmarked grave, where he had stood for over a century. Your post will be different. Your vigil, your own. As he spoke, I felt something changing. My perception expanding beyond the cemetery grounds. Becoming aware of every grieving visitor, every tear shed, every boundary crossed between healthy remembrance and dangerous obsession. Now I stand watch every Sunday, a gaunt figure in dark clothes beside a simple grave. I never bring flowers, never kneel in prayer. I simply observe with unblinking eyes, identifying those who visit too often, who linger too long, who cannot release their dead. Sometimes they notice me watching. Sometimes they ask the groundskeepers about me. Sometimes they approach, curious or concerned about the silent mourner who never seems to leave. When they do, I offer the same gentle warning that Morris once gave me, a warning they rarely heed until it's too late. The dead always recognize those who are about to join them. After all, we've been watching them for a very long time. My dog Charlie is the only reason I found out what was happening at the Old Town Cemetery. He's a stubborn mutt, the kind who needs a walk late at night just to tire him out. I never minded those walks. Quiet neighborhood, cool night air. But lately, I've started dreading them. The cemetery was right around the corner from my house, in a sleepy town in rural Ohio. It was small, old, mostly forgotten graves hidden under moss-covered headstones. Most folks avoided the place after dark, but for Charlie and me, it was just part of our nightly routine. Peaceful enough, I thought. But about 2 weeks ago, something changed. It was nearly midnight, and Charlie tugged me down the sidewalk towards the cemetery fence. That's when I first noticed the flashlight beam flickering between the graves. Strange for anyone to be here so late. But I assumed maybe it was the groundskeeper working odd hours. Shrugging, I continued on, thinking nothing more of it. Next night, same thing. This time I paused, squinting into the darkness. Someone was hunched over in the far corner, digging quietly and rearranging small stones around an unmarked plot. I took a hesitant step closer, curiosity tugging at me. But as soon as my shoe crunched on gravel, the figure turned sharply toward me, flashlight beams snapping off instantly, plunging the cemetery into eerie darkness. By the time my eyes adjusted, whoever it was had vanished. A chill ran down my spine. Something felt off. Groundskeepers don't run away like startled animals. They wave, maybe call out a greeting, not disappear into thin air. I tried to shake it off, convincing myself I was just imagining things. But every night afterward, the same figure appeared, always at midnight, always in that unmarked corner. And every time, if I came even slightly closer, they vanished like a shadow chased by light. I couldn't let it go. The mystery consumed me. Who was this late-night gardener, and what were they really doing? One night, I finally got up the nerve to investigate properly. I left Charlie at home, took a flashlight, and crept silently toward the cemetery fence around midnight. Heart pounding, I climbed carefully over the wrought iron gate, landing quietly inside. The cemetery felt different at night, colder, more oppressive. Every shadow felt watchful, every noise threatening. I moved cautiously toward the corner, pulse drumming in my ears. The gardener was there, flashlight aimed downward, hunched intently over their mysterious task. As I inched closer, dread pooling in my stomach, my flashlight beam caught a glint of metal in their hand. A knife. I froze. Not gardening shears or tools. A large, wickedly sharp hunting knife. Fear locked me in place, my breathing ragged. The figure stood suddenly, stiffened, slowly turning toward me. Their face remained hidden beneath a wide-brimmed hat, but I felt their stare piercing me like ice. My body screamed to run, but fear kept me rooted. The figure suddenly took a step toward me, their breathing rough and uneven. Panic broke my paralysis. I spun around, bolting toward the gate, stumbling desperately through the darkened cemetery, tripping over roots, stones scraping my palms as I crashed against tombstones in blind terror. I reached home, slammed the door, locking every lock twice. Shaking violently, I called the police, babbling my story, knowing how insane it sounded. The officer who showed up listened politely, clearly skeptical, but promised to patrol past the cemetery later. Sleep didn't come easy that night, or any night afterward. The cemetery gardener haunted my dreams, his hidden face looming over me, knife glinting dangerously. Days passed. The police found nothing, convincing me maybe I had imagined the worst. Then, a week later, a headline shattered that illusion. Local man arrested in connection to missing persons cases. My blood ran cold as I read the details. A neighbor living 3 streets over, Glenn Foster, a quiet, elderly man known for his prize-winning roses, had been arrested after police discovered evidence linking him to disappearances going back nearly a decade. They'd found a hidden journal in his basement detailing victims, grave sites, and rituals, each page more chilling than the last. The most unsettling discovery: beneath the roses in his backyard, detectives uncovered bones, many bones. He'd been meticulously gardening victims beneath the soil, transplanting remains periodically, hiding traces of his horrific crimes beneath carefully tended flowers and shrubs. A blurry photo showed him being led away in cuffs, his face obscured beneath a wide-brimmed gardening hat, the same hat from the cemetery. I felt sick, realizing I'd confronted this monster face to face in the dead of night. But one question remained unanswered. Whose graves had he been tending in the cemetery? Unable to resist, I visited the spot in daylight, hard hammering as I approached. Near the back fence, a small patch of disturbed soil remained, loosely covered by leaves and stones. Kneeling, I brushed away the debris, revealing something pale, buried shallowly beneath. Hands shaking, I gently pulled it free. A weathered photograph wrapped carefully in plastic, faded but recognizable. It was me, taken from a distance, walking Charlie near the cemetery gate. A message scrawled hastily on the back read, "You were next." I stumbled away, nausea choking me, panic rising. How close had I come to becoming just another flower in Glenn Foster's twisted garden? Glenn's arrest made national news, but I couldn't watch. My nightmares intensified, paranoia invading every waking moment. I installed security cameras, triple-checked locks, jumped at every sound. Months passed, yet the fear lingered. I still walked Charlie, but never after dark. And never, ever near the cemetery. Because sometimes late at night, when sleep eludes me, I swear I can still hear the quiet scraping of stones, the soft shoveling of earth, drifting through my window. And in those dark moments, my mind cruelly whispers that maybe, just maybe, Glenn wasn't the only late-night gardener lurking in the shadows of this quiet town. I'm 34, a freelance photographer living in a small town in upstate New York. My thing is capturing the beauty in forgotten places. Old barns, abandoned factories, and especially cemeteries. There's something about the weathered stone angels and moss-covered urns that pulls me in. The silent stories begging to be framed. The local cemetery, St. Mary's, was my favorite spot, its crumbling statues glowing under moonlight. But over the past month, I had noticed things missing. Small stone angels, ornate urns, even a cherub's head, vanished from graves. I chalked it up to vandals until one night, camera in hand, I saw a rusted van parked near the cemetery gates, its back doors open, shadowy figures loading tarp-covered shapes inside. The air was thick with fog, the kind that clings to your skin. My boots sank into the damp grass as I crouched behind a headstone, my camera's lens fogging slightly. The van's engine idled, a low growl cutting through the silence. My heart thudded, but I told myself it was just kids, maybe scrappers stealing for cash. Still, My hands shook as I adjusted the focus, snapping a blurry shot of the figures. 2, maybe 3, moving like they knew the place. I crept closer, the gravel crunching underfoot. A metallic clank echoed from the van, followed by a muffled thump, like stone hitting wood. My stomach twisted. I ducked behind a mausoleum, the cold marble pressing against my back. The figures paused, their heads turning toward the sound I'd made. I held my breath, the fog swallowing my exhale. A flashlight beam swept the path, grazing the edge of my hiding spot. I pressed lower, my jeans soaking in mud. They moved on, but I caught a glimpse of one. A man, wiry, with a shaved head and a tattoo curling up his neck. He hefted a tarp-wrapped bundle into the van, the shape too angular to be anything but a statue. I snapped another photo, the shutters clicked deafening in my ears. The man froze, his head snapping toward me. I didn't wait to see if he'd spotted me. I bolted, weaving through headstones, my camera bouncing against my chest. Back home, I locked the door and pored over the photos. The van's license plate was too blurry to read, but the man's face was clear, hard eyes, a scar splitting his eyebrow. My skin crawled. I posted about it on a local forum, asking if anyone else had seen the van. Within hours, a user named Grave Watcher messaged me. "Stop poking around. You don't know what you're messing with." My mouth went dry. I didn't reply. The next night, I couldn't stay away. I told myself I needed proof, something to take to the cops. St. Mary's was darker than usual, the moon buried behind clouds. My flashlight caught a fresh gap where a stone urn had been, dirt scuffed around the base like it'd been pried up. Then I heard it, a low scrape, like metal on stone, coming from the older section of the cemetery. My pulse spiked. I followed the sound, my sneakers silent on the grass. The van was back, parked deeper in near a crumbling crypt. The same man was there, unloading tools, a crowbar, a shovel, a roll of tarp. Another figure stood watch, a woman, her face half hidden by a hood. I crouched behind a tree, my camera's lens trembling. The man pried at a grave, the crowbar's screech cutting through the night. A stone angel toppled, cracking against the ground. My breath hitched. This wasn't just theft. It felt ritualistic, deliberate. I snapped a photo, the flash betraying me with a brief, blinding light. The woman's head whipped toward me, her eyes glinting like a predator's. "Hey!" she hissed, her voice low but sharp. I ran, branches snagging my jacket, my heart pounding so hard I thought it burst. The van's engine roared behind me, headlights cutting through the fog. I dove into a ditch, mud swallowing my knees, and waited, my breath ragged. They didn't find me. The van peeled out, tires screeching. I stumbled home, my clothes filthy, my camera clutched like a lifeline. The photos showed more than I'd realized. The woman's face, pale and gaunt, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. The grave they'd been digging, not for a statue, but deeper, like they were looking for something, or someone else. I called the cops, showed them the photos. They searched St. Mary's the next day. The grave was empty, but they found traces of blood in the dirt, too old to be fresh, too recent to ignore. The van was gone, no trace of the man or woman, but they dug deeper into the cemetery's records. Missing artifacts weren't the half of it. Over the years, bodies had gone missing too, unmarked graves, forgotten plots. The cops suspected a black market ring, stealing relics and worse. But the man and woman were ghosts, no names, no traces. I moved out of town a week later. I couldn't stay, not with every shadow feeling like that woman's smile, every creak sounding like a crowbar on stone. I don't photograph cemeteries anymore. My camera stays in a drawer, the photos deleted, but I can still see them when I close my eyes. The cops never found the van, but last month, I got an email from an anonymous account. Attached was a single photo, a stone angel, my stone angel, propped in a dark room, its eyes scratched out. Below it, one word, watching. The air in Willowbrook Cemetery carried the bite of wet stone and decaying leaves, the kind of quiet that settled into your bones. I'd been tending graves here in this small Virginia town for 2 years, a job I took at 27 after my dad's death. Left me adrift, done with my old retail gig. Raking paths and scrubbing headstones suited me. It was steady, and I could sketch epitaphs for my art blog in the downtime. Most nights it was just me, my flashlight, and the crickets. But yesterday, while clearing Lycian off Margaret Harlow's 1823 headstone, my fingers snagged on a carving. 3 intersecting circles, like a twisted Venn diagram, etched deep, fresh enough to smell of cut marble. I traced the symbol, my flashlight beam trembling, the scrape of my chisel loud in the dusk. My heart thudded, a memory sparking. I'd seen it before, last winter, helping my niece with a school project on local legends. Old police scans from the 70s mentioned the Ebon Circle. 5 teens gone missing, their diaries rambling about. Midnight choirs in Willowbrook. The case was dropped, insufficient evidence, but noted carvings at each disappearance. I told myself it was vandalism, kids with too much time, but my gut churned. The circle's too precise, too deliberate. Back at the groundskeeper's shed, I sketched the symbol, my pencil shaking. Mr. Donovan, the 80-year-old head groundskeeper who loved whittling birdhouses, caught me. Weather damage? He grunted, his shears snipping a rose too hard, petals scattering. Forget it, Ethan. Let the dead lie. His eyes were sharp, avoiding the sketch. I nodded, but my skin prickled. That night, my security cam pinged, showing Donovan at Harlow's grave, laying a black rose, his lips moving. Like a prayer, the creak of his knees echoed as he shuffled off, the rose stark against the marble. I hit the town library at dawn, the air thick with mildew and dust. Old papers from 72 screamed, "Quarterback vanishes after practice." 75. Prom queen last seen at cemetery. All cold cases, all tied to Ebon Circle symbols near Willowbrook. The librarian, Miss Tate, handed me my crowfishy, her hands unsteady. "Don't come back," she whispered, her eyes darting to the door. My pulse raced. I found a 73 detective's note. Symbols mark a pattern. Town's hiding something. Reason said it was history. Coincidence. But intuition screamed it was alive. Here and now. At midnight, I returned to Harlow's grave with a UV light, the symbol glowing, tool marks fresh, a 4th circle added days ago. My breath caught. A thump came from the headstone, soft like something shifting below. I pried at the base, my chisel slipping, and a compartment clicked open. Inside, Polaroids, yellowed, of the 70s teens, mouths sewn shut with black thread. Newer photos, my niece at soccer, Ms. Tate at the library, me raking leaves last week. My hands shook, a needle pricking my finger, blood smearing the photos. A hum rose from the mausoleum, low, like voices blending. I crept toward the sound, flashlight flickering, the hum growing, words forming, names, my name. The mausoleum's stone door was ajar, the air inside damp, coppery. My beam caught Donovan, his back to me, chanting with others. Town council members, the pharmacist, my pastor, circled around a pit, bones glinting, fresh red clay oozing. Fresh red clay oozing. "Quiet keeps us safe," Donovan said, his knife glinting, pressed to a photo of my niece. My throat tightened. They were the Ebon Circle, sacrificing outsiders to protect the town. Their motive, a twisted civic duty, feeding the land's hunger for silence. A scrape behind me. Ms. Tate, her eyes wild, lunging with a blade. I dodged, tripping over a gravestone, the hum swelling, drowning my thoughts. I ran, graves blurring. Harlow, 1823. Gibson, 72. Martinez, 24. The pattern burning in my mind. Branches clawed my face, the hum chasing me, voices chanting my name. I hit the highway, headlights blinding, a trucker stopping as I babbled. Sheriff Lowry's deputies found me at dawn, calling it a breakdown. My photos lost in evidence. They raided the mausoleum, found bones, but no circle, no proof. Donovan retired, the town throwing him a party, his smile wide as he waved. The sheriff adjusted his tie, a faint circle pattern embroidered, his eyes on me. I quit, moved to Richmond, took a warehouse job, but last night, my locker held a new Polaroid. Me, at the cemetery, chisel in hand, a black rose tucked into my belt. On the back in jagged scrawl, Sing quiet, Ethan. I lock my doors. Keep a knife close. But every hum outside, every shadow, feels like the choir. Their pit still open. My voice next in their song. The city's noise can't drown the hum in my head. I'm safe, they say. But the circle's out there, carving, chanting, waiting for me to join the silence. My name is Ben. For the past year, working the late shift at a downtown diner, meant my walk home was usually around 2 a.m. To shave off a good 10 minutes, I developed a shortcut, a winding path through a poorly lit, older section of Willow Creek Cemetery. It sounds creepy, I know, but honestly, it was usually just quiet. Peaceful even. The towering tombstones and ancient, gnarled oaks were just shadowy shapes, familiar landmarks on my nightly trek. Until last night, the air was heavy, a damp chill that promised rain. The only light came from a distant street lamp, casting long, dancing shadows, and the weak glow of my phone screen as I scrolled through a podcast. I was about halfway through, near the crumbling western boundary wall, an area usually pitch black and deserted, when I saw it. Faint, bobbing lights, flashlights, and the unmistakable, rhythmic thud, scrape of shovels hitting earth. Scrape of shovels hitting earth. My first thought, vandals, or maybe weirdly dedicated groundskeepers working at an ungodly hour. Curiosity, that stupid, dangerous itch, got the better of me. I killed my phone screen, letting my eyes adjust to the deeper darkness, and edged a little closer, using a large angel-top monument as cover. There were 3 of them. Figures. That's all I could make out at first. Their forms bulky and indistinct in the gloom, their faces completely obscured by shadow, and the hoods of their dark jackets. They were digging, methodically, near the base of that crumbling wall. No chatter, just the grim percussion of their work. A small, powerful flashlight sat on a nearby tombstone, casting stark, upward shadows that made the scene look even more ghoulish. I should have just turned around, taken the long way, pretended I hadn't seen a thing. But I was frozen, a knot of unease tightening in my chest. As I watched, they stopped digging. One of them straightened up, then slowly, deliberately, turned their flashlight beam directly towards where I was hiding. The light was blinding. I flinched, shielding my eyes. They knew I was there, or at least, they knew someone was. The beam held on me for a long, agonizing moment. I couldn't see their face, just the blinding glare. Then, just as suddenly, it snapped off. The figures stood there, motionless, 3 dark shapes against the even darker backdrop of the cemetery wall. The silence was absolute, heavy, pressing in on me. I didn't need a verbal warning. The message was clear. You saw nothing. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I backed away slowly, then turned and practically sprinted out of the cemetery, not looking back. The image of those silent, watching figures burned into my retinas. The next day, I was a wreck. Sleep had been impossible. Every shadow in my apartment seemed to hold a threat. Was it just some local weirdos, or something more sinister? The logical part of my brain told me to forget it, to stay away. But a darker, more compulsive part, the part that reads too many true crime forums, couldn't let it go. That night, against every instinct for self-preservation, I found myself approaching Willow Creek Cemetery again. I told myself I'd just walk by, on the well-lit street outside, just to see if anything looked different. But as I got closer, the pull of that dark corner was too strong. I had to know. I took the shortcut. The air was even heavier than the night before, the silence more profound. As I neared the western wall, my steps were hesitant, my senses on high alert. The spot where they'd been digging was obvious. The earth was freshly turned, a dark rectangular patch amidst the overgrown grass and weeds. It looked like a grave, but there were no headstones here, no markers. This was unconsecrated ground. And then I saw them, not at the digging site, but closer to the main path this time, half hidden behind a row of weeping angel statues. The same 3 figures. They weren't digging tonight. They were just waiting, watching. As I drew level, one of them made a low sound, a guttural grunt that wasn't quite a word, but was filled with unmistakable menace. I saw the glint of something metallic in another's hand, a shovel, held not like a tool, but like a weapon. I didn't run this time. I just kept walking, my pace quickening, my gaze fixed straight ahead, trying to project an air of someone who hadn't seen a thing, who was just passing through. But I could feel their eyes on my back, cold and heavy. I noticed a small, muddy spade, the kind you'd use for gardening, leaning against a nearby crypt. It hadn't been there before. It looked recently used. The shortcut was no longer a shortcut. It was a gauntlet. Each night, the dread grew. I started taking the longer route, but even then I felt watched. I'd see shadows moving in my peripheral vision when I passed the cemetery gates, catch glimpses of dark figures standing just inside the wrought iron fence. Were they the same people, or was my fear just painting them into every dark corner? The climax came a week later. I was on edge, sleep-deprived, probably not thinking clearly. I'd convinced myself I needed proof, something concrete to take to the police. Armed with my phone camera, I decided to try and get a picture, just a quick, blurry shot of the digging site, or of them, if they were there. It was a stupid, reckless idea. I crept into the cemetery, sticking to the deepest shadows. The digging site was there, the earth looking even more disturbed. And they were there too. This time, they were placing something large and oblong, wrapped in what looked like a heavy canvas tarp, into the hole they'd previously dug. The metallic scent I'd noticed before, faint but acrid, hung in the air. I raised my phone, trying to steady my shaking hands. Just as I was about to snap a picture, a twig cracked under my foot. A small sound. But in that loaded silence, it was like a cannon shot. All three figures froze, then slowly turned their heads in my direction. One of them raised a powerful flashlight, pinning me in its beam. "Well, now," a voice rasped, low and gravelly. It was the first time I'd heard one of them speak clearly. "Looks like our little night walker is curious." They started moving towards me, not fast, but with a chilling, unhurried confidence. The one with the shovel hefted it. I was trapped. The wall was behind me, the path back blocked by another of the figures who seemed to materialize out of the shadows. "You shouldn't have come back," the gravelly voice said. "Some things are best left buried." There was no time to think. I did the only thing I could. I scrambled, blindly, towards the crumbling boundary wall, adrenaline giving me a desperate burst of speed. I heard them behind me, their footsteps surprisingly quick. I reached the wall, a jagged section lower than the rest, and threw myself over it, scraping my hands and knees, tearing my jacket, but not caring. I landed hard on the other side, in the unkempt alleyway that ran behind the cemetery. I didn't look back. I just ran until my lungs burned and the sounds of the cemetery faded behind me. I made it home, barricaded my door, my body shaking uncontrollably. I called the police anonymously, from a payphone the next day, told them about the digging, the figures, the wrapped object. I don't know if they investigated. I never saw anything about it in the news. Willow Creek Cemetery still stands, silent and imposing. I take the long way home now, every single night. That shortcut, that slice of darkness I used to walk through without a second thought, is now a place of profound terror in my mind. I don't know who those figures were, or what grim business they were conducting in the dead of night. Were they part of some strange secret society? Criminals disposing of evidence? Or just the self-appointed terrifying keepers of Willow Creek Cemetery, tending to graves that would never have a name? I don't want to know. Some secrets are best left undisturbed, some paths best left untrodden, and some nights the silence of the dead is far less frightening than the quiet industry of the living. Cemeteries have always been places of contradictions for me. Peaceful, yet eerie. Beautiful, yet mournful. As a freelance photographer, specializing in historical architecture, I often found myself wandering through these silent cities of stone, capturing the intricate carvings of angels and obelisks bathed in late afternoon light. Hillcrest Memorial Gardens was particularly photogenic, with its rolling landscapes and century-old mausoleums. On that October afternoon, the sky hung heavy with rain clouds that never quite delivered, creating perfect diffused light for photography. Golden hour was approaching, that magical time when the setting sun turns everything it touches to amber. I'd been working my way through the older section when I spotted an angel statue I hadn't photographed before, its face eroded by decades of weather, into a hauntingly blank expression. I was adjusting my camera settings when the sound of quiet sniffling reached me. Looking up from my viewfinder, I scanned the rows of headstones and spotted a small figure standing beside a freshly dug grave about 30 yards away. A child, maybe 7 or 8 years old, wearing a navy blue raincoat despite the dry weather, the hood pulled up. My first thought was that they were visiting a deceased relative, but no adults were visible nearby. As I watched, the child seemed to sense my gaze and turned toward me. Even from this distance, I could see tear tracks glistening on their pale cheeks. Something about the scene felt wrong. A child alone in a sprawling cemetery as evening approached. I lowered my camera and called out, "Are you okay?" The child hesitated, then began walking toward me with the careful, measured steps of someone much older. As they drew closer, I noticed other details. Scuffed red sneakers beneath the raincoat, dark hair falling across eyes that seemed too watchful, too knowing for someone so young. Their gender wasn't immediately apparent. They existed in that androgynous space of early childhood. "I'm lost," the child said in a small voice that carried perfectly in the cemetery stillness. "I can't find them." "Your parents? Your parents?" I asked, kneeling down to eye level, my camera hanging forgotten around my neck. "Are they somewhere in the cemetery?" The child's gaze drifted beyond me, toward the older section where mausoleums stood like miniature houses for the dead. "Maybe. I don't remember what they look like." A chill that had nothing to do with the October air settled against my skin. "You don't remember what your parents look like?" I kept my voice gentle, thinking perhaps this was a child with some cognitive impairment or trauma. "They change." The child replied simply, as if this explained everything. I tried a different approach. "What's your name? Maybe we can find a cemetery caretaker or call someone to help." "Jamie," the child answered, though something in their hesitation suggested this might not be true. "I've been waiting a long time." "Waiting for what, Jamie?" "For someone to find her." The hair on my arms rose. "Find who?" Jamie's eyes, a deep brown that appeared almost black in the fading light, fixed on mine. "The girl in the blue dress. They put her under the angel with no face. They put her under the angel with no face." My mind flashed to the statue I'd been photographing, its features worn to anonymity by time. Surely they couldn't mean she's been there 6 days now. Jamie continued in that same soft, matter-of-fact tone. "The man with the scar brought her at night. No one saw except me." My mouth went dry. 6 days ago, the local news had been dominated by the disappearance of 16-year-old Eliza Mitchell. Last seen walking home from band practice, she had been wearing a blue dress. The police had no leads, no witnesses. "Jamie," I said carefully, "how do you know about the girl in the blue dress?" "I saw him digging. He had a flashlight with red tape on it and a shovel with a broken handle. He kept looking around, but he didn't see me watching." The level of detail was alarming. This wasn't something a child would invent. Either Jamie had witnessed something horrific, or I didn't want to consider the alternative. "Did you tell anyone else what you saw?" I asked, reaching for my phone. This needed to go to the police immediately. Jamie shook their head. "No one believes children. The man said so. The man said so." Their gaze drifted over my shoulder, focusing on something behind me. "He said if I told, he'd come back for me too." A prickle of awareness traveled down my spine, the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Slowly I turned, half expecting to see someone standing there, but the cemetery remained empty save for the silent stones and lengthening shadows. When I looked back, Jamie had taken a step away from me. "We need to call the police," I said firmly. "What you're telling me is very important, Jamie. It could help find." He cut her hair off first. Jamie interrupted, the words tumbling out faster now. He kept it in his pocket. Then he wrapped her in black plastic before putting her in the hole. She wasn't moving anymore, but her eyes were open. They looked like glass. My stomach clenched. These weren't the observations of a child making up stories. This was the account of a witness to murder. "Jamie, I need you to stay right here with me while I call for help," I said, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. "We're going to make sure you're safe, and we're going to tell the police everything you just told me." But Jamie was backing away, eyes now fixed on something beyond the cemetery gates. "He's coming back." I turned to see a dark sedan pulling up to the cemetery entrance. Its windows tinted so heavily they appeared black in the dimming light. The car moved slowly along the winding cemetery road, as if searching for something or someone. "Jamie, do you recognize that car?" I asked urgently. But when I turned back, the child was already running between the headstones toward the oldest part of the cemetery. "Wait!" I called, abandoning my call to follow. The 911 operator's voice faded as I pocketed my phone and ran after the small figure, weaving through the marble forest. Jamie moved with surprising speed and certainty, as if following a memorized path. I struggled to keep up, my camera bouncing against my chest as I ran. The dark sedan had stopped near where we'd been standing, its engine still running. When I caught up to Jamie, they were standing before the faceless angel statue, looking down at the ground beside it. The earth appeared undisturbed, covered in the same carefully maintained grass as the rest of the cemetery. "There's nothing here, Jamie," I said, catching my breath. "Are you sure? You have to dig," Jamie interrupted, pointing at a specific spot. "They covered it with new grass to hide it, but she's underneath." In the distance, a car door slammed. Footsteps approached, unhurried yet deliberate. I had seconds to decide. Pulling out my phone again, I snapped photos of the area Jamie indicated, then grabbed their hand. "We need to go. Now!" Jamie resisted, surprisingly strong for such a small child. "But what about her? We can't leave her alone in the dark. We'll get help, I promised. But first we need to be safe." The footsteps grew closer. Jamie suddenly tensed, eyes widening as they stared past me. Before I could react, they yanked their hand free and darted behind a large monument. I turned to see a man standing 10 yards away, silhouetted against the dying light. Average height, average build, entirely unremarkable, except for one detail I could make out even in the growing darkness. A scar that ran from his right temple down to his jaw. "Beautiful evening," he said, his voice pleasant, conversational. "Taking photographs?" My camera suddenly felt like a target on my chest. I nodded, trying to appear casual while positioning myself to block his view of where Jamie was hiding. "Cemetery architecture," I explained, gesturing vaguely at the angel statue. "The light at this hour is perfect for capturing textures. Interesting hobby." He took a step closer, hands in the pockets of his jacket. "Have you been here long? I thought I saw you talking to someone." My pulse quickened. "Just on the phone. Reception spotty in here." His head tilted slightly, eyes narrowing. "Is that right?" Behind him, I could see the dark sedan still idling on the cemetery road, its headlights now illuminated in the gathering dusk. Something about the car nagged at my memory. I had seen it before, not just today. The realization hit me with stomach-dropping clarity. 3 days ago, on the local news, the police had released security footage showing a dark sedan near the school where Eliza Mitchell was last seen. They were asking the public to help identify it. The man took another step closer, close enough now that I could smell cigarette smoke clinging to his clothes. "This is an odd place to be alone so late. Most people find cemeteries unsettling." "I was just leaving," I said, backing away slowly. My phone felt heavy in my pocket. The interrupted 911 call, the photos of the site Jamie had indicated. "If I could just get to my car. You know," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken, "I come here often, to pay respects. So many stories buried here. Some of them should stay buried, don't you think?" His hand emerged from his pocket, and my heart stuttered. But instead of a weapon, he held what looked like a security badge. "Cemetery security," he explained. "We're closing soon. We're closing soon. I'll need to escort you out." The badge looked legitimate, but something felt profoundly wrong. Cemetery security wouldn't drive an unmarked sedan. They wouldn't approach lone visitors with veiled threats. "Of course," I said, forcing a smile. "My car's just over by the main entrance." As we walked, I scanned frantically for any sign of Jamie, but the child had vanished completely. The man kept pace beside me, close enough that our shoulders nearly touched, his eyes constantly sweeping the surroundings. "Did you get any good shots today?" he asked conversationally. "A few," I replied, gripping my camera as if it were a lifeline. "Especially of that angel statue back there. Such interesting weathering on the face." His stride faltered for just a moment. "That one's been here since the cemetery opened." "That one's been here since the cemetery opened." Saying a lot of history. We were approaching the parking area now. Only 3 cars remained. My hatchback, the dark sedan, and an old pickup truck I assume belonged to cemetery staff. The man escorted me all the way to my car door. "Drive safely," he said as I unlocked it. "These roads can be treacherous after dark. Easy to have accidents." The threat wasn't even veiled anymore. With shaking hands, I got into my car and locked the doors immediately. The man stood watching as I started the engine and pulled away, his figure growing smaller in my rearview mirror until the cemetery gates swallowed him from view. 2 miles down the road, I pulled into a gas station and called 911 again, this time completing the call. I explained everything: Jamie's story, the specific location, the man with the scar who claimed to be security. The dispatcher assured me officers would investigate immediately. As I waited for the police to arrive, I scrolled through the photos I'd taken, looking for anything that might help identify the exact spot Jamie had indicated. And then that's when I noticed something in the background of one image. A small figure watching from behind a distant headstone. It wasn't Jamie. This child wore a blue dress, her hair cropped close to her scalp, her eyes reflecting the camera flashlight glass. The police arrived at the cemetery within 20 minutes of my call. By dawn, they had uncovered Eliza Mitchell's body exactly where Jamie had indicated, wrapped in black plastic beneath recently laid sod beside the angel statue. The medical examiner confirmed she had been dead for approximately 6 days. Her hair had been removed. The cause of death was strangulation. Security camera footage from the cemetery gates showed my car entering that afternoon, and later the dark sedan. What it didn't show was a child entering or leaving at any point that day. When police reviewed older footage trying to identify the sedan's owner, they discovered something chilling. The same car had visited the cemetery multiple times in the past month, always driven by a man who presented ID as a cemetery employee named Robert Craner. No such person existed on the cemetery's payroll. 2 days later, police arrested a man matching my description at a gas station 50 miles away. The scar on his face was genuine. In his car, they found gardening tools, rolls of black plastic, and a collection of hair from 3 different victims. His real name was Paul Mercer, a groundskeeper who had worked at 3 different cemeteries across the state, each corresponding to locations where young women had disappeared over the past 2 years. I gave my statement to detectives describing Jamie in detail. They searched the cemetery and surrounding neighborhoods, but found no trace of a child matching that description. No missing children had been reported in the area. When I asked about Jamie, the detective interviewing me exchanged a look with his partner. "We found something else buried near Eliza," he said finally. "Remains of another victim. Much older case. A child, approximately 7 years old, who disappeared in 1998. Dental records identified them as Jamie Carson. The child had been wearing a navy blue raincoat when they were found. I never returned to Hillcrest Memorial Gardens, and I no longer photograph cemeteries. Sometimes, on overcast days when the light turns soft and diffused, I think I catch a glimpse of a small figure in a blue raincoat watching me from a distance. But they always vanish when I look directly. The police told me it was likely trauma that caused me to imagine the child, my mind creating a witness to help process what I had unconsciously observed. They said Paul Mercer had been watching me from the moment I entered the cemetery, that I had likely noticed his surveillance on some subconscious level. But they can't explain the photographs. In every picture I took of that angel statue, there's a small blurred figure standing just at the edge of the frame. And in one, the last image before I fled, 2 children stand hand in hand in the background, watching me with solemn eyes, one in a blue dress, one in a raincoat, both waiting for someone to find them. Both waiting for someone to find them. I'm 31, a barista in a small Virginia town. The kind where everyone knows your coffee order. My life's pretty simple. Work, binge true crime podcasts, and walk my dog, Max, a scruffy mutt with a nose for trouble. There's a pet-friendly cemetery near my apartment. All mossy headstones and shady oaks, perfect for our evening strolls. But for weeks, Max has been obsessed with one spot, a bare patch of dirt in the back corner. No marker, no name. He'd bolt there, dig like a maniac, and whine, a low, eerie sound that made my skin crawl. I'd yank him away, thinking it was just a squirrel's scent, until one evening, his paws unearthed a tattered shred of a child's jacket, blue with a faded dinosaur print. My stomach dropped. That patch wasn't just dirt anymore. The cemetery was quiet that evening, the air heavy with the smell of rain-soaked earth. Max strained at his leash, his whines sharp as we neared the spot. I knelt, my flashlight catching the jacket's frayed edges in the dirt. It was small, too small, stained with something dark and crusty. My heart thudded. Probably just trash, I told myself. But my hands shook as I stuffed it into my pocket. Max's eyes locked on the patch, his body trembling. I tugged him home, the jacket burning a hole in my coat. That night, I couldn't sleep. The fabric sat on my kitchen counter, its dinosaur print staring back. I Googled missing kids in the area. Nothing recent, but a cold case from a decade ago popped up. A 6-year-old vanished from a park nearby. No leads. I pushed the thought away, but Max's whining echoed in my head, like he knew something I did. The next evening, I went back. Stupid, maybe, but I needed answers. Max led me straight to the spot, his claws tearing at the dirt. The ground was soft, like it'd been disturbed before. A faint metallic clank stopped me cold. My flashlight caught a glint of something buried, a rusted keychain shaped like a cartoon dog. My mouth went dry. I snapped a photo, my hands unsteady, and leashed Max tight. That's when I heard it, a low hum, like an engine, from the cemetery's far gate. I crouched behind a headstone, Max growling softly. A pickup truck idled by the entrance, its headlights off. A man stepped out, tall, wearing a dark jacket and work boots. He carried a shovel, his movements slow, deliberate. My pulse raced. I fumbled for my phone, but Max's growl grew louder, betraying us. The man's head snapped toward us, his face shadowed but his eyes catching the moonlight, cold and unblinking. I bolted, Max's leash tangling in my legs. The truck's engine roared to life behind me, tires crunching gravel. I cut through the headstones, my breath ragged, the keychain clutched in my fist. A branch snapped behind me, too close. I dove into a thicket, thorns tearing my skin, and held Max close, his body shaking. The truck slowed, its headlights sweeping the path. I pressed my face into the dirt, the smell of decay choking me. The truck moved on, but I stayed there, heart pounding, until silence returned. At home, I locked every door, the keychain and jacket hidden in a drawer. I called the cops, showed them the items. They took them, said they'd look into it, but their faces were grim. The keychain matched one described in that old missing child case. The cemetery wasn't just a graveyard, it was a dumping ground. I stopped walking Max there, but he'd still pull toward the cemetery gate, whining like something was calling him. One night I woke to scratching at my door. Not Max, who was curled up beside me, but something heavier, slower. My blood ran cold. I grabbed a knife from the kitchen, my hands slick with sweat, and peered through the peephole. Nothing. But on my doorstep was a small, dirt-stained toy, a plastic dinosaur, like the one on the jacket. I moved apartments a month later, but the cops found nothing. No truck, no man, no answers. They dug up that patch in the cemetery, empty, but the soil was loose, like it'd been turned over years ago. The case is still open, the man's still out there. I don't know why he took that kid, or how many others, but Max still whines in his sleep, and I still check my locks 3 times a night. Last week, I found a photo slipped under my new door. A grainy shot of that cemetery spot, with one word scratched into it. More. I don't walk Max near cemeteries anymore. I don't trust quiet towns or unmarked patches of dirt. If your dog ever digs at a spot like it's possessed, don't ignore it. Some things buried want to be found, and some people don't want you to look. The last shovel of earth has fallen, but the disquiet of these 7 resting places remains. Did any particular epitaph etch itself onto your soul tonight? A final chilling twist to ponder? The true horror, perhaps, is that some residents of these silent cities are not so silent after all. What darkness do you sense when you pass those iron gates? Confess your cemetery fears in the comments. If these chilling tales from beyond the veil have resonated, subscribe to Nightmare True Horror and illuminate that like button. Until the next time the bell tolls for another terrifying tale, rest in peace, if you can.